Daf Testament Aleph, the Mishnah right at the top of the Yomid. Zok the Mishnah, Ein Chayshin Shemagira Chuldam Yibayis Labayis. We're not concerned that a weasel may have dragged the chametz from one house to another house. Meaning, a person, he did the bedikas chametz. He saw that there was no chametz. Well, how can we rely on that? Perhaps that after the fact, a Hulda brought chametz from a different house and dragged it in, and now this house has chametz in it. We're not concerned for that. We're not concerned for that possibility. Or we're not concerned umi makam lamakam, or from one place to another place within the house. Dimkain, because if you were concerned for that, earlier, you'd have to continue it and extend it even further. Well, you'd have to say maybe even if you did a bedika in the entire house, and maybe even if you did a bedika in the surrounding area, in other houses, but you'd have to extend it to another neighborhood or another city. And you'd have to say that a Chomed house is only considered to be Boduk, as the Ran explains. It's only considered to be Boduk if everything is checked all at the same time. So you see that there's no Chometz anywhere. There's not in this house. There's no Chometz in other houses as well. You checked it all at the same time, and there's no possibility that a Hulda could have dragged the Chometz. And of course, clearly that's not feasible. There's no end to it. There's no end to how much you would have to do the bedika. So therefore, we are not choishish for that. Rav Chanan explains it in two ways. One is that you might have said that we are choishish for this, but we're not, because ein l'davar seif, and it's a takana de ein etziri chol lamed by. Or alternatively, he explains is that, well, clearly you do not have to do this type of a bedika, so obviously we are not choishish. It's a raya that we're not choishish that a Hulda brought the chametz. So the Gemara time of the lechazin of the shak, we're not concerned. It's only because we didn't see that the weasel brought the chametz into a house. However, ha'chazin of the shak, if we have seen that the weasel brought the chametz into the house, chayshinan u'boy bedika, there we would be chayshish, we would be concerned, and we would say you have to do another bedika. Well, even if you saw that the Hulda brought the chametz into the house, why would you have to be concerned? Why wouldn't we say that perhaps the weasel ate it and there's no more chametz here anymore? Mi'loy tanan, did we not learn in a similar manner that we do assume that the animal ate the item in question? Because we learn the dwellings of Avdei Chom are Tomei. We're chayshish that they would bury, there would be a nefel, they would bury the child in the house, and it has tumah, and if a person would come into contact with it, whether it is a tumas oil or tumas maga, but the person would come into contact with it, then he'd be tomei. So we say Medur to me. And how long is the Ayvik in the house where we have to be concerned that there might have been a nefil over there? How long is that he lived over there? So and therefore we would require an examination to search to make sure that it's Torah 40 days. Because 40 days is the time that it takes a nefil to be formed. And that's the time that it takes for the nefil to be formed to be matamid. And we say that if it's 40 days, then you are concerned and you need a bedika, even if the Avicham does not have a wife, we are still concerned because of prutzim ba'arayas, and therefore we still have to be concerned there was a nefil that was buried there. However, any place where a Hulda and a Chazer go there, ain't tzarich bedika. You don't need a bedika because we will assume that the animal ate the nefil, and the nefil is no longer there. So you see that when there is the animals are there, we would assume that the item has been eaten. Here also, even if we saw that the Hulda brought chametz into the house, why wouldn't we assume that they ate it? Tosfos says that we assume that the Hulda Chazer ate the nefil is only when it's this type of an item where it's a nefil, where we say it's a nefil, which is something which is soft, and therefore we would say that they ate it. But something which is not soft like that, then we would not assume that they ate it. So, however, in any event, why don't we say over here, even if we saw that the Chula brought the chametz into the house, why wouldn't we assume that they ate it? More answers on the Rabbi Zer Leikash. With the balsar, they certainly would eat it and finish it, and it's not there anymore. Again, as Taisa said, this type of a balsar. But belechem, if it's bread, they would leave it over. And therefore, you can't assume that the chametz is not in the house, and if you saw that the holder brought it in, you would have to do another bedika. Amar Rava. Rava gives a different teretz. He says, how can you compare the cases? Haimai. What comparison is there? Bishlam Hasa, Bishlam over there, we say that we assume that the animal ate the nefel because Amar Hava, Amar Lehava. Why can we rely on the fact that the animal ate it? Because we're not even sure, it's not even certain that there was a nefel there to begin with. Possibly it was there, possibly not. And even if you say it was there, perhaps he ate it. So therefore we can rely on that to say that it's Torah. But in this case in question, we're talking where we saw certainly that the Hulda brought in the chametz. So there certainly is chametz in the house. Who says that he ate it? How can we rely on that? So it's a sofek and a vadai. There's a vadai chametz here. There's only a sofek where the Hulda ate it. So in such a case, we will say, Ein Safek Mitzvah Midei Vadai. There was certainly chametz, possibly the Hulda ate it. We can't rely on that. So therefore you need another bedika. Mashen came in the case over there, there wasn't even a Vadai that there was an Eifel. So it's a Safek. Break the Gemara of Ein Safek Mitzvah Midei Vadai. Do we really say that a Safek is not Mitzvah Midei Vadai? That we don't say the Safek is Mitzvah Midei Vadai? Taisus explains it. Well, if it's a sofek, why should we say it's Maismin Devai? So Taisus explains, meaning in this type of a sofek, where it's very likely that it occurred. You mean to say that even in this type of a situation where it's very likely that it happened, you're still saying sofek Maismin Devai? We learned in Brisa, if a person who's medactic and mitzvahs, he died. He left over a storehouse full of pears and is full of products. Now you don't know whether he took the trumas and meisers or not. You don't know if it's tevel or it's chulin. Is it permitted or not? So we say, even if it was that day, even if the meruach, the gemar, the processing was completed that day. There's no chiyuv of being mafresh trumas and meisers unless there was a meruach, it was processed, and it was brought into the house. So even if the processing was done on that day, we still say harein b'chesus mesukanim. We still say that we can put it in a chazaka and rely that the chaver took the trumas and meises. He was mafresh trumas and meises, and therefore we say it's permitted la'achila. Well, here we know that certainly these pears were teva. The pears have a chiyuv of meiser, and we see that they're processed. They have a chiyuv of meiser, so it's a vade teva. The sofek musar and the sofek loy musar. It's only a sofek. Did he take the trumas and meisers or not? Because it's sofek and meiser midei vadai, and yet we say that the sofek is meiser midei vadai, and it's b'chesus mesukanim. The Gemara answers, halsam vadai vadai. It's not a sofek meiser midei vadai. It's considered to be a vadai. The vadai ma'aser tirabachanina chazal, that we treat it as vadai, that he certainly took the trumas and meisers, like Rabbi Chanina Chazal says. That he said, it's a chazaka, and we can rely on it with certainty that a chaver, he would take the trumas and meisers immediately. He would be mafresh the trumas and meisers immediately. And therefore, we don't treat it as a sofek, we treat it as that the vadai, there was a vadai trumas and meisers that have been removed, and therefore it's a vadai uvadai. The Gemara answers, Ema Safik a Safik. perhaps you can still say it is a sofek, but it's a sofek v'sofek. It's not a sofek mites midei vadai because it's a sofek, because you are assuming, your assumption was that it's vadai tevel. Well, who says it's vadai tevel? Now, we assume that it's vadai tevel because it was processed. So once it's processed, there is a chiyuv of being maksh shumas and maises. But who said that there's a chiyuv of tevel here? Dilma mikora emer delay tvili. Maybe it was not tevel. Maybe there was no chiyuv of maisron. How is that? Like Rav Yoshi says, Rav Yoshi says, Marim Aramal Tfu also a machnisa b'meitz shaloi. A person can make a harama. He can make a kind of a tray, and he can bring a machnisa b'meitz shaloi. He brings the tuah, he brings the grain with his chaff into the house, which would allow this animal to eat it and be potter from maises. Now, the chiyuv of maises minatayra is when the grain is processed and the produce is processed, it's smoothened out, it's brought into the house. Then, when it's ripening bias, there's a chiyuv d'oraisa. Rav Ashi says a person makes a harama if he brings it into the house before the processing is finished, b'maitzla, with the chaff. So then, there's no chiyuv of maises from his maiz minatayra. And therefore, he can feed it to his animal. What's the significance of feeding to his animal? And he can feed it to his animal, meaning, even though there's no chiyuv midoraisa from some maises, but the Chachamim said there's still a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. However, the Chachamim said that you can eat it achilas arai. You can still eat it achilas arai before taking the trumas and maises. Now, feeding to an animal is defined, no matter what the quantity is, that's defined as achilas arai. So therefore, he can feed it to his animal, which is achilas arai, and without taking the trumas and maises. Similarly, he can eat it for himself, achilas arai, and without taking trumas and maises. So, therefore, how do you know that this is a vadai tevel? Maybe minatera, it's not tevel. Maybe he brought it into the house b'maitzshel. So therefore, it's not tevel. And therefore, it's not a question of safek mites midei vadai, because it's not a vadai. Taisus asked the question, well, nevertheless, but still midrabanan, he can't eat it achilas keva, he can't eat a meal with it without taking trumas and maises. He can only have a snack from it, achilas arai. So, therefore, as far as an achilas keva is concerned, as far as a meal is concerned, it is considered vadai. And we do say safek is mitzvah midei vadai. Taisus answers that, however, as far as an Isser d'Rabbanan is concerned, since the Isser to eat the achilas keva, to eat the meal, is an Isser d'Rabbanan, as far as an Isser d'Rabbanan is concerned, we would rely on this, even if we would treat it as a safek, but the Rabbanan would be mekel, and we would rely on that as far as an Isser d'Rabbanan is concerned. Taisus, well, b'dikas chametz is also an Isser, a chiyuv d'Rabbanan rather. So why should we not rely on it? Why shouldn't we not rely that the Hulda ate it? Taisus answers and explains that therefore we must say that in the case at hand that the medika is required is when the person did not do bittul. Because if he did bittul, then it would also only be a chiyuv d'Rabbanan over here. So we must say we're talking where he did not do bittul, where the chiyuv therefore is a d'oraisa, and therefore we require him to do another bedika. Interesting to note, the Sasemis mentions over here, we're saying that maybe he was ma'arim and he brought it b'moitz shalom. Well, if he's talking about a chaver over here, a person who's very meticulous with mitzvahs, why would we assume that he would be ma'arim? So he explains that if it's a genuine chaver, we can rely that he certainly took the trumas of maises. Elamai will say maybe it's not a complete chaver. Well, in that case, then he could have, there's a possibility that he would have brought it in b'moitz shalom, where there would be no chiyuv minatayra in any event. Is it true that a safek not is not mitzvah midei vadai? But have we learned in the brisa Amar v'Yehuda mitzvah b'shef falsa shel mitzvah berima? There was once an incident involving a shivcha in the city called Rimon, and it was a shivcha of a certain metzik. He was an oppressor. He was a strong, powerful person, and he used to force people to do things. Shetila nefel labor. She put a nefel into a bor, and therefore we don't know what her status was. And Isha gives birth. Isha tashitazriya v'yolda zochar. If it's a zochar, then there is a period of time of 37 days and 33 days, a total of 40 days. If it's in a keva, it's double that. So the question is, what is her status as far as tumutara? Uba kain vehitzispoin a kain, a friend or family member, came and leaned into the bor, so he was not careful about not being tomei. Later im zachro im the keva, to ascertain whether this nefel was a zachar and a keva, and what the tuma and tahara of the mother would be. And they said that the kain is tar. So if he leaned over, and if there was a nefel over there, then he would be mile on the nefel, he should be tomei. But they said that he's tar. Why is that? Because it was common over there to have weasels and bardaluses, and they would have dragged away the nefel. So therefore, we can rely on that and not say that he was mile on the mace, and therefore he remains to be tar. Over here, it's a vade. She certainly put the nefel into the bor. But it's a question, at the moment, at the time when the kohen leaned over into the pit, into the bor, was the nefel there or not? It's a suffix. Because it's suffix, and yet we say that the suffix, that the chaya, the bardalus, removed the holder of the bardalus removed the nefel, that suffix is moitzimidei, the vadai, that the nefel was certainly there. The nefel was vadai there. And we're saying the suffix that maybe that the holder bardalus removed it is moitzimidei, the vadai, and we said the kohen is tor. So because it's suffix moitzimidei vadai, more says, loitim ishetil nefel labor. No, the Maisa wasn't that it was a vadai nefel that she threw into the bor, ela ema shepila kimin nefel labor. Something that appeared like a nefel. It appeared it. But we don't know if the sack contained an actual fetus or not. So we don't know if there was an actual mess over there. Maybe it was mole ruach, and maybe there wasn't an actual mess. So I don't really know, certainly for certain, if there was a tumor or not. We said, but he wanted to determine if it is zachar and a keva, which implies that there was certainly a nefel there. Firstly, to ascertain, was there a nefel there or not? And even if you're going to say that it was a nefel pila, later im zacharu im lekevi, and then to say whether it's a zachar or a nekeva, to ascertain whether it's a zachar or a nekeva. So therefore, it is not considered to be a vade. So, therefore, when the kohen, he bent over and looked into the bor, now we have to be saying over here, he looked into the bor, but he really couldn't see if there was a nefel there to begin with. So he went in on the tzad, he'd been leaned over on the tzad that perhaps there was a nefel, and to determine what the gender of this nefel was. But in actual fact, we have to say that he did not see a nefel, and therefore, because of the possibility that a holder or barless removed it, and therefore, since it's only a suffix to begin with, they were matarim. So it's not suffix midei moitz midei vadei, it's suffix moitz midei suffix. The more answers hasan vadei vadei vanu. It's considered to be a vadei. Perhaps I'll tell you that no, there was a nefel over there. It was a vadai, but this is considered a vadai. Came in the chulda baras mitzum sham vadai garu b'hayishaita, because since they frequent over there the chulda and the barlas, we can assume that they certainly dragged it away, and it's treated as a vadai, and therefore it's not ein sof. Might be day vadai is a vadai uvadai. Now the Gemara continues, and it answers what seems to be an obvious problem, because Rava said before that he rejected the notion that the holder, the barless rather, would have eaten the flesh completely. He introduced the concept of ein sof midei vadei. Well, Over here, even if you consider it to be a vadai, and a vadai, but according to Rava, we can't assume that the chulda or the barrel is completely consumed the flesh. So therefore, if that's the case, we should be concerned that part of it is left over. And therefore, even if they're mitzvim sham, but still maybe there's a nafel on the board, so why is the kohen tor? So more answers, nehid shar mishaya, even if we assume that he didn't consume it completely and some of it was left over, but migra mias vadai garum haishaita, but they certainly dragged it away, so it's not in that place. And therefore, since it's not in that place, the kohen is tar. Lishna achrina nehid vade achlam lo yamrinan vade garu lacharaya amrinan, that they dragged it into their burrows, into their holes where they store their food.